Devon explained that Eddie Hall has only two options against Brian Shaw. The first one is a king's move, which he cannot do because he is not experienced enough to do that. And the second one is a flop wrist press, which he should not do because if he tries to do that, he will get injured for sure. Hello arm wrestling fans, let's discuss the interesting highlights from the recent Neil Pickup, Devon LARRATT and Brian Shaw interview. Brian Shaw made one thing absolutely clear. It wasn't like Brian kind of tricked Eddie Hall into having a super match against him when he has trained for like 4-5 months and Eddie got only 8 weeks of notice. That is not correct. In fact, it was Eddie Hall who asked for this match. It was him who set it up. So now he cannot blame anyone for it if he has not trained for this match. Eddie is the one that set this up. He's the one that called this out. He's the one that contacted Don to get this all set up. So I assume that he had been training since we were in this room doing that podcast. So after listening to this statement from Brian, one of these two things has to be clear. The first one is Eddie Hall is lying. He has to be training for more than 6 weeks now. And the second one, if the first one is not true, then the second one is he just does not care about arm wrestling. And he's in it only for a paycheck. Otherwise, why would he himself call Don Idris and ask him to set a match against Brian Shaw at King of the Table and not even really train for it? Only 7 to 8 weeks of training. And this while being combined with the fact that he is simultaneously training for an MMA match kind of leads you to believe that this second fact may be true, that he just doesn't care enough about arm wrestling. But I hope it is not the case. I hope he genuinely did not get enough time to train for this match, because Neil Pickup clearly confirmed that he has been in contact with Eddie and he did not train for more than 6 weeks until now, maybe even 5 weeks, and on match day he will have less than 8 weeks of training. But Brian did say that Eddie is not taking it serious. He's just playing video games all day long. He isn't even taking his MMA match serious because he looks like a complete mess. Then he asked Neil about Eddie's training, how frequently he's going to train on the table. Then Neil Pickup mentioned that so far Eddie has had 4 table sessions with Neil, and the 5th one was just some theory, some arm wrestling knowledge without actually getting on the table. And until match day, they will have 2 more table sessions. And Brian just laughed at this fact and his confidence grew even more. Neil, how does that make you feel that Devon, Auden and I in one day will put in more table time and more work than you have with Eddie in this entire prep? Neil said that imagine what happens if despite that Eddie Hall smacks you on the table. So it looked like Neil was getting too much passionate about this super match. I'm not sure if Neil is going to be able to help Eddie to win this match, but while trying to prepare him to win this match, it looks like he might decide to get himself prepared and make a comeback into arm wrestling. That's how passionate he seems as of now. But Brian did acknowledge that Eddie will have absolutely zero chance of beating him if he wasn't trained by Neil Pickup. Now, he has maybe very slim chances, but still almost nothing. And throughout the podcast, Neil kept on mentioning that there is a chance that Brian Shaw also may get injured in this super match. And Brian and Devon both were just laughing it off. They don't think that it is even a possibility. They both believe that Brian is just going to play with Eddie Hall in whatever way he wants. Then Neil tried to scare Brian Shaw with some different tactics by saying that compared to when he first met Eddie for this prep and compared that day with today when he left Eddie Hall's house, he was a completely different human being and Brian is going to be shocked on match day. Last week, Eddie Hall mentioned that if the match somehow goes into an endurance battle, then Brian Shaw would have absolutely no chance because their endurance, their stamina are not comparable. Eddie Hall is much better than Brian Shaw. And recently we saw Brian Shaw training with blood flow restriction cuffs just like Michael Todd. So is he taking that comment seriously from Eddie Hall, or was that just a promotional stuff? Because with big guys, big YouTubers like Brian Shaw, you rarely know if he's just promoting or selling some equipment or some services from some guy, or if he's genuinely trying to do that to gain some advantage in their super match. Or maybe it's the perfect combination of both of these things. I don't know. But Brian is also taking Eddie Hall seriously. Maybe not so much because he's doubtful that he can beat Eddie or not, But instead, maybe he's just training for another super match against another better opponent. Thanks for watching, like the video and subscribe.